Okay, Leah, I'm going to start the meeting now. Good evening. This is Joe Breen. I'm the Mass DOT Project Manager for the Fairhaven New Bedford Swing Bridge Replacement Project. This is a virtual public information meeting number 3 on tonight, December 19th, 2024 at 6 p.m. The project file number is 612557. I will now hand the meeting over to Leah Grodstein, the Mass DOT meeting producer.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Leah, and I'm one of the MassDOT producers today, facilitating the Q&A later on and acting as your tech support. My co-producer, Addie, is also on the call. So we're just going to go over some Zoom basics before we get into the technical presentation. The very first important one is that if you are having any audio or technical problems or problems with your internet, we have a call-in number for this meeting. It's 301-715-8592, and you'll use the webinar ID 834-4055-3502. And if you didn't catch all those numbers, they're also in your registration email. You can toggle the closed captioning on and off using the CC button on the bottom toolbar. On that bottom toolbar, we also have the audio settings where you can check your speakers and microphone. We've got the raise hand button, which is for the Q&A that we'll have at the end of the presentation. We also have the Q&A button. We'll answer questions in the Q&A at the end of the presentation, but you can write them, as they occur to you at any point. And finally, the view button in the upper right-hand corner can adjust the meeting view settings. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. You may have noticed that this public meeting is being recorded. MassDOT may choose to retain and distribute the video, images, audio, or chat transcript from the meeting. All parts of the meeting are considered a public record. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you're consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you're not comfortable with this, you can choose to be a silent participant in the meeting by not participating in the Q&A and therefore not putting your name into the public record. Or you could choose to excuse yourself from the meeting entirely. You won't miss out on anything because the slides will be posted. I'll also note that this is webinar format, which means that your mic and webcam are not controlled by you. This is just so we can maintain some order in the meeting. And again, we'll take Q&A at the end. Next slide, please. All right, and finally, we have the MassDOT policy on diversity and civil rights on screen. It states that all MassDOT activities, including public meetings, are meant to be free of discrimination. MassDOT complies with all federal and state civil rights requirements preventing discrimination based on protected characteristics. We welcome the diversity from across our entire service area. If you have questions or concerns, you can reach out to the Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. Thank you for joining. We appreciate your participation. Now, can we go to the next slide, please? Before I hand the meeting back to the MassDOT project manager, we also have Representative Strauss on the call, who would like to say a few words about the project. So, all right, yes, been promoted to a panelist. You should be able to unmute yourself.
I think I have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm happy to hold my comments until after the presentation because I think it's most useful then, if that's okay, with the order of presentation that you've planned.
Oh, sure. All right.
If
Then
I
I'll,
could be recognized after that, that'd be fine. But
yes,
I
we
think,
can do that.
like anyone else, I'd prefer to watch the presentation and then share my thoughts.
Okay, I'll put you back to an attendee for now and then fix it later on. So that
That's
means
fine.
that I'll hand it back to the MassDOT PM, which is Joe Breen.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you, Representative Strauss. Tonight's agenda, we'll first start with introductions, followed by the project summary. Then we'll go into the 2024 progress update, the approved bridge type, the next steps for the project, followed by a question and answer period. The presentation participants are myself, Joseph Breen, the Mass DOT Project Manager. The Legislative Affairs contact, Gareth Saunders. The Mass DOT producer, Leah Grodstein and Addie Alloway. The Mass DOT District 5 Assistant Project Development Engineer, Diane Hayes. And the Prime Consultant Project Manager, Thomas Cole. So how did we get here with the project? Well, first, in 2022, funds were secured for the design, development, and advancement of the Swing Bridge Replacement Project. In October of 2022, we had our first public information meeting with initial coordination with stakeholders, preliminary data gathering, and we initiated agency coordination. In 2023, the bridge replacement alternatives were reviewed. The stakeholder coordination was completed and preliminary agency coordination was conducted. In January of this year, in 2024, we had our second public information meeting, the bridge replacement alternative determination, stakeholder coordination, and preliminary U.S. Coast Guard coordination. And tonight, December 19th, 2024, our third public information meeting. The recent local outreach and coordination first started in August 10th of 2022 with the New Bedford legislative briefing at the Fairhaven High School. On October 3rd, 2022, at the Fairhaven Public Information Meeting number 1 was held in person. On October 6th of 2022, the New Bedford Public Information Meeting number 1 was held in person. On October 12th of 2023, the New Bedford and Fairhaven Planners, Port Authority, and legislative briefing was held at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. In January 1st of 2024, the New Bedford and Fairhaven Public Information Meeting number 2 was held in person. In March 26th of 2024, the City of New Bedford Planners, Port Authority, and Mass DOT Zoom meeting was conducted. On August 1st of 2024, Working Group number 1 was initiated with the New Bedford and Fairhaven Planning Departments, the Port Authority, Majeski and Masters, and Mass DOT. And tonight, December 19th, 2024, the New Bedford and Fairhaven Public Information Meeting number 3, which is virtual. So why was this project initiated? The existing conditions of the bridge, which was constructed in 1901 and is 120 plus years old. The bridge was last rehabilitated in 1992. The bridge is inspected fully every 2 years, with recent inspections indicating deficits. The bridge receives special interim inspection between the biennial inspections due to age and condition. And the bridge operators are on site daily and record and address operational deficiencies. The goals of the project are to reconstruct the bridge to ensure a 75-year design life or greater. We want to minimize disruptions to bridge users during construction. We want to eliminate functional deficiencies such as a long opening time, which causes delays for vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle traffic. The minimal underbridge clearance requires the bridge to open for most vessels. In the narrow channel in the center pier location prevents larger vessels from entering the upper harbor, and the center pier increases the potential for vessel impacts. We also want to improve the bicycle and pedestrian accommodation on the bridge to allow for future corridor reconstruction. Stakeholder coordination has been conducted with the navigation channel users, consisting of commercial fishing, maritime construction and maintenance, freight and cargo, and recreational boating, as well as the bridge users consisting of vehicular, pedestrians, and bicyclists, as well as the communities of New Bedford and Fairhaven. We've also continued stakeholder coordination with environmental and historic preservation agencies, emergency services and local government, the United States Coast Guard, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Highway, and lastly, Mass DOT. The following map shows the project limits inside the red rectangle at the bottom of the map. On the left side of the map, we have New Bedford, and on the right-hand side, Fairhaven, with Route 195 at the top, Route 18 on the left-hand side, and Route 6 between the communities of New Bedford and Fairhaven, with Fish Island on the left and Pope's Island on the right. And the project scope is to replace the movable span and flanking approach spans between Fish and Pope's Island. We want to maintain the existing Route 6 corridor with the least interruptions as possible and incorporate allowances for future corridor improvements into the replacement bridge. The next slide shows the project limits up closer between Fish and Pope's Island in the red rectangle. So what is the selected alternative? The selected bridge type is a vertical lift span, which will allow a navigational channel width of 260 feet, a navigational vertical opening of 138 feet with 135 feet plus a 3-foot additional height for predicted sea level rise. The navigational vertical opening in the closed position will be 6 feet from the mean high water mark. And the proposed intermediate vertical opening will be 80 feet. The bridge roadway width will consist of 4 11-foot travel lanes with a 4-foot shoulder, as well as 2 10-foot shared use pathways on the replacement bridge, and safety barrier between the roadway and shared use pathways. The next example here we show the conceptual image of a vertical lift bridge on the current Route 6 approach. And this view is from Route 6 on Fish Island towards Fairhaven. The next slide is the roadway cross-section for a vertical lift bridge. And the current and future vehicular traffic counts require two 11-foot lanes in each direction, which is shown in the cross-section, as well as a 4-foot wide roadway shoulder, which provides additional space for bicycle traffic using the roadway. The bridge sidewalks are 10 feet wide to provide a shared use pathway on the new structure. And the approach sidewalks and shoulders will taper to meet the existing roadway cross-section at the adjacent driveways on Fish and Pope's Island. Also, this slide will be shown again in the presentation. The vertical lift span advantages for navigational users are that navigation will be maintained with the exception for occasional outages that will be approved by the United States Coast Guard in advance and communicated to all mariners. The vertical lift design has the lowest impact during construction for commercial fishing vessels, pleasure craft, other commercial vessels, including towed, tugs, and steamers. And it has the limited restrictions to navigational opening during construction. The vertical lift span has advantages for roadway users. It has the shortest duration of bridge outage during construction, which is potentially 1 to 1.5 years versus a 3 to 5 years for the other alternatives. It minimizes the traffic detour duration. It minimizes the duration of impacts to adjacent and local businesses on Fish and Pope's Island. And access for people walking and biking will have similar impacts to traffic. And lastly, the vertical lift span advantages for construction is that it will have the optimal choice for constructability with the smallest foundation footprint. It allows for accelerated construction methods, and the lift towers can be constructed with minimal impacts to navigation, vehicular traffic, and people walking and biking. The potential detour routes are shown in the following map, where on the left-hand side, we have New Bedford, and the right-hand side of the map, we have Fairhaven, with Route 195 at the top, Route 118 on the left-hand side, and Route 240 in Fairhaven, shown on the right-hand side. The project limits are shown in the red circle between Fish and Pope's Island. And the studies for the proposed detour routes will start with previous detours that have been used. Additional traffic studies were performed in the fall of 2024 at key intersections such as Benoit Square at the intersection of Howland Road and Main Street, the intersection of Cogshell Street and Route 18, at the Octopus intersection at US Route 6 at Pleasant Street and Foster Street. And the detour routes and alternative transportation will be studied for people walking and biking. So moving forward, how has our design progressed? I wanted to provide an additional example that's been shown before as a refresh of an an example of a vertical lift bridge in the closed position. And the next slide is the vertical lift bridge in a open position. And next, I will now provide a conceptual vertical lift bridge placed into the context from selected points of view from the New Bedford historical landmarks in the next few slides. First, I'll start at the Navigational Lightship Sailor Memorial. Then I will review the slide at the Union Street at Route 18 intersection, followed by a view at Tonneson Park, then at City Pier and Pope's Island. And as you can see, the project limits and swing bridge currently are shown in the red circle in the locus map. The first view is from the National Lightship Sailor Memorial, viewing the schooner Ernestina Morrissey. The vertical lift bridge is shown in the circle on the left-hand side of the photo. And we'll keep this slide up for a few more seconds to allow attendees to conceptualize what the vertical lift bridge would look like in this photo. The next view is from Union Street at the intersection of Route 18 in New Bedford. The vertical lift bridge circled in the center of the photo. The next view is from Tonneson Park in New Bedford at the Fisherman's Tribute Monument. And the bridge is circled right above the monument. The following is a view from City Pier number 3 in New Bedford. The following view is from Pope's Island looking towards New Bedford with next to the radio tower. And lastly, the view from Route 6 on Fish Island looking towards Fairhaven. So we have the views of an example of a vertical lift bridge and the views from different parts of the historical harbor in New Bedford. And the proposed roadway cross-section of the vertical lift currently, as stated before, will have two 11-foot travel lanes in each direction, a 4-foot wide roadway shoulder, which will provide additional space for bicycle traffic using the roadway. The bridge sidewalks on both sides will be 10 feet wide to provide a shared use pathway on the new structure. And the approach sidewalks and shoulders will taper to meet the existing roadway cross-section at the adjacent driveways on Fish and Pope's Island. So the next steps for the project consist of the following. First, step 1, we're going to complete the field data collection for geotechnical and hydraulic studies. Step 2, we're going to have working group meetings. Third, at the 25% design bridge structure sketch plan phase, which are projected to be completed in the spring of 2025. And I will go over what bridge sketch plans are in the next slide. We'll complete the highway design plans. On step 4, the 25% design public hearing will be held. And then 5th, we'll progress to the final design. The 25% design sketch plans. So what are sketch plans? They confirm the overall design for the foundation types, pier locations, foundation and span materials, span dimensions, and railing types. They lay the groundwork for architectural treatments, and they coordinate details with the roadway design, and they incorporate geotechnical and hydraulic investigation recommendations. The team will also be in continued engagement with the United States Coast Guard Coordination, Mariner Outreach, New Bedford Port Authority, the City of New Bedford and Town of Fairhaven, and state representatives. So moving forward, how will we keep you informed? You can reach us at the following project website. You can submit email comments to the following email account, or you can use the QR code on the right-hand side of the screen. And lastly, you can submit written comments to Carrie LaValle, PE, the Chief Engineer at Mass DOT, 10 Park Plaza, Boston, MA, 02116. And attention major projects, and please include the project file number 612557. I will now hand the meeting over to Gareth Saunders, the Mass DOT Legislative Affairs Coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And now, before we open up the meeting for general questions, I would like to acknowledge and allow our state representative, William Strauss. He is the chairman of the Joint Transportation Committee. Representative Strauss, thank you for all your many years of public service. And now, if you would unmute your microphone, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's very kind of you, and I appreciate everyone's participation on the MassDOT side, as well as the consulting engineer, and of course, the members of the public who have taken the time this evening to participate. I'll just make a few brief comments. As was indicated, I'm not just a state representative who represents, frankly, both communities that are affected by this project, representing all of Fairhaven and parts of New Bedford. But I've had a role at the state level as chair of the Joint Committee of Transportation the last 14 years. So this is a project that's been part of my official responsibilities as chair, but also obviously in terms of my district interest in both the traffic flow on Route 6 and the importance of our industrial working waterfront in New Bedford, and protecting from a transportation standpoint the integrity of the infrastructure we have and the needs of our existing maritime-related industry. So we have two important factors going on here. And as has been indicated in the presentation by Mr. Breen, the MassDOT has been involved in an extensive way for nearly 2.5 years in getting us to a point where a replacement bridge is finally being advanced. For many, many years, sincere efforts have been made to fix the existing 120-plus-year-old bridge. But I think the consensus has developed that a replacement bridge is needed. And I want to congratulate MassDOT and the engineers, but especially the governor and the lieutenant governor, who have authorized the commitment of extensive resources to advancing this project to where we are this evening. And as been described, and I know it's in the weeds, what this preliminary 25% design level means is, depending on the public's input and reactions and those from those affected stakeholders, we can now settle on, and I think we should, a particular bridge type. So if you see, for members of the public, those yet to make presentations and speak, particular design things, how could this design be more aesthetically pleasing? That's fine. If you see differences in the way in which lanes can be adjusted, that's fine. But a key thing that allows that further work to continue is to reach community consensus, I would say, on the bridge type. And what that means is that technical term, vertical lift. A lot of effort's gone into this. I'm not an engineer, but I am confident from the many transportation projects with which I've been involved that this vertical lift bridge, for the reasons that were outlined in the presentation, is the best approach to continue to move forward on the project. And if we achieve that basic structural goal, so that we more than double the width of the channels. Right now, those commercial fishermen and marine interests and mariners who go through the bridge when it's open, it's only a 95-foot channel in each direction. That's not, it sounds like a lot to some, but it has risks. What we're going to get with this bridge design is a 260-foot wide channel when the bridge is in the elevated position, which is going to be not only navigationally easier, but much, much safer. And so from a navigation standpoint, it's better. And also the height, the clearance when the bridge is in maximum height proposed is 138 feet. It's actually higher than the clearance under the Cape Cod Canal Bridge. And I think the Four River Bridge in Quincy, certainly the Braga Bridge. And it competes with bridges up and down the coast and even as far as Seattle. So 138 feet is not a small amount. If people came along, I suppose, and said, gee, we'd rather see 142 or 145 feet. I don't know for sure, but I'll bet differences in that range could be accommodated. But this accommodates what our port is, what it can be, what it should be in the future. If potentially there are people who think another type of bridge, what often is called a drawbridge, is better, I think it's now incumbent on them to say why. But when you look at the construction impacts, half the time potentially or more in construction impacts, less impact on the private property abutters whose land would have to be taken to build any other type of bridge. This one comes through on any measure or way of measuring that you could think of. So I want to indicate how strongly I endorse and support the work that MassDOT and their engineers have done to date in getting us to this bridge type decision. And that's the critical thing we have to pass at this point. The navigational width, the navigational height as minimums have been approved by the US Coast Guard, who oversees the navigational interests here. And I think that's important. They are, I think, respected navigational experts who have also said that's a sufficient height. That's a more than sufficient width because it's an improvement over what we have now. If there were a design issue that I'd ask MassDOT to consider going forward, it's what I noticed in terms of the projected widths for pedestrians and bicycle users. As I understand the presentation, we have in each direction, east and west, preserved lanes or areas which are separated for safety reasons for pedestrians. And the shoulder of the roadway, I think, is 4 feet in either direction or in both directions for bicycles. The only thing I'd ask to be considered, and I'm not an expert on this, so it's just a measure, but it doesn't change the vertical lift decision, which is critical now, is that some thought be considered as to whether within the design width, some physical separation, more than just painted lanes, could be accommodated for the shoulder area for bicycles. I know that raises complicated questions, but I think it's worth considering at this stage. Some shoulder, of course, for safety reasons is always necessary. But to accommodate both pedestrians and bicycle users, maybe some thought can be given. For those who don't think the structure that they've seen in the presentation so far is pretty enough, that is the kind of issue that, of course, MassDOT and the community can get engaged in, whether there's unique lighting or things that indicate the special maritime heritage we're proud of in New Bedford. Those kind of design elements are always available going forward. So I'd ask people who have yet to speak to consider their comments in the context of the most critical issue, which is that we hopefully can reach a community consensus on the bridge type, because that will allow us to move forward with a cheaper, quicker to construct, and functional bridge that meets the project goals identified by Mr. Breen. To question the bridge type at this point, frankly, sets us back years. And I'm not sure people have the patience or should have the patience for that. We need this project to advance. And again, I am very happy and pleased and supportive of the MassDOT efforts and those of Governor Healy and Lieutenant Driscoll to help get us to this point. And I conclude my remarks, and this may be the last public event as a state representative that will upset some and please others, I know. But it's been an honor and a pleasure for these years to act on behalf of the citizens in my district and the region. And I thank MassDOT for hosting this meeting tonight.
Thank you so much, Representative or Chairman Strauss, for your remarks.
Yeah.
And on behalf of MassDOT, we want to thank you for your many years of advocacy to the residents and the businesses of the greater Fairhaven and New Bedford's communities and for our whole Commonwealth. Because of your leadership and your colleagues' support, you have funded many projects in your district and throughout the Commonwealth. So thank you so much for your advocacy.
Thank you. And I forgot, my colleague, Representative Markey, had reached out to me because if he had a conflict, I promised him, I wrote a note, I wrote his name in big, huge letters here to remind me, and I'm sorry. He wishes he could be here, but he also supports what I've indicated, which is that the vertical lift bridge is the way to go and we should get moving. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier, but thank you again.
Thank you, Chairman Strauss. Now, let's open up the question and answer period for other elected officials who may be in attendance. So if you are either an elected official or a staff member in an elected official office, if you would please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and you can unmute your microphone and then we'll hear from you. So are there any other elected officials who would like to speak at this time? Okay, if there are no other attendees
Oh,
who are,
sorry, there are some folks with their hands raised.
oh, okay, okay.
Are you able to look at the participant list and identify if they are?
Um, let's see. If you would acknowledge the names, Leah, for me,
I
and
think, it's like, is it Representative Mark Sylvia? If I have that correct. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just, don't know if I can turn my camera on or not, but I will go ahead and just say thank you very much for the opportunity to provide comment today. As MassDOT has acknowledged, and Chair Strauss as well, this is a critical transportation and port infrastructure project. It's important, I think, that the bridge design, construction, and operation and maintenance are well thought out and take the communities of Fairhaven and New Bedford, along with the port, local businesses in and around Pope's Island and Fish Island, and municipal officials into great account. And that's what has been the case to date. And I appreciate that. And I look forward to being more engaged on behalf of the communities I represent. Now that Bill is retiring, I'll be stepping into that role. And so I appreciate all the work that's been done to date. As it relates to design, it's important that the bridge is the right design from a practical perspective. And as Chair Strauss outlined, the vertical lift bridge seems to meet that practical perspective, meaning that it functions to meet the needs of those industries that rely on a fully functional and navigable bridge, including the fishing, freight, tourism, transportation, energy, and other participants in our local blue economy. But I also think it is important that visual impact is considered in that analysis and encourage, as Rep. Strauss did, others to weigh in on visual impact and thoughts and ideas that they have. I also think it's important that it's a design that facilitates not only vehicle traffic, but also incorporates pedestrian and bicycle activity. It's critical to connecting people to housing, to services and entertainment between New Bedford and Fairhaven. Designing safe, accessible sidewalks and bike paths into the design, I believe, will enhance the quality of life for all of our residents, regardless of how they travel. And I appreciate Representative Strauss's point about physical barriers. That's going to be really important. That as we create these opportunities for bicyclists and pedestrians, we want to make sure they're as safe as possible. And then finally, as it relates to the development of a traffic plan or overall closure plan during construction, I think it's vital that MassDOT work directly and frequently with our public safety, public works, and other municipal officials, both in Fairhaven and New Bedford. And importantly, I think also engage neighborhoods that will bear the impact of detour routes. And then finally, and I know some of this is beyond 25% design conversation today, but I do think it's important to emphasize that project funding and reimbursement for public safety costs related to first responder calls on Pope's Island and at the bridge construction site during construction, particularly for Fairhaven first responders who will be responding in those instances, as well as traffic detail and public works related costs related to the implementation of this plan, should be established early in this process and absolutely with direct input from Fairhaven and New Bedford Police, Fire, EMS, and Public Works. So those are my initial comments. I don't get sworn in until the 1st, but I know this is a critically important project that is important to our communities. And so I look forward to being further engaged as this process continues. And I'll just add to what MassDOT said about Chairman Strauss and his impact, not only as a representative, but as House Chair of the Joint Transportation Committee. Thank you, Representative Strauss, for helping to move this forward. This is a really important project, and I look forward to rolling up my sleeves. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Representative-elect Sylvia. Thank you so much for your remarks. So are there any other elected officials who are in attendance or their staff members that would like to ask a question or make a statement?
We have Councilor Maria Giesta from New Bedford.
Go right ahead.
Hello,
Hello, Counselor. Go right ahead.
how are you? Good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me these few minutes. I am Maria Giesta, City Councilor from Ward 2 in New Bedford, Mass. First, I would like to thank State Representative William Strauss for his service to our community, and also being chairman of the Joint Transportation Committee. Thank you, sir, for everything that you have done for us. I know that I will miss you, but I also know that State Representative-elect Mark Sylvia will continue to do the great job that you have done for us. So you definitely leave everything in good hands. So thank you. I will say that at this time, I do believe that the vertical bridge makes the most sense. I am not an engineer or an expert at no means, but it looks like a very good design, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm happy that the bridge will be made in the way that pedestrians will be able to take advantage of this. And my only concern is the safety of those pedestrians, especially the bicyclists. Looking at the what was presented to us, it looked like a small bike lane, but I'm not sure. But that is my only concern, honestly, is I know how fast people drive on the bridge that now exists. And I know that Mass DOT and others will make sure that our pedestrians will be safe. But that's my main concern, is the people who are riding their bikes and walking along that bridge. But again, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it looks really good. I think the vertical bridge makes a lot of sense, but again, I'm not an expert. And again, thank you to State Representative Bill Strauss. You will be missed. Thank you very much, and everyone have a good evening, and Merry Christmas and a happy and healthy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Counselor, for your remarks. It's been brought to my attention that we have a representative in attendance from Representative Antonio Cabal's office. Would you like to say a few words?
If so, raise your hand.
Okay, Leah, I'm going to pass the meeting over to you, and you can handle the rest of the questions. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Gareth, and apologies if we missed any elected officials. So now we're going to start the public Q&A. So as some folks have already figured out, you can click the raise hand button to ask your question verbally to our project team here today. We do have over 40 people on so far. So we do ask that you share only one question or comment at a time and limit your speaking time to 2 minutes so we can allow everyone a timely chance to participate. And if you are joining us via phone today, you can dial *9. That's the same as raising your hand on the phone. You can also use the Q&A button to type verbal questions, which some folks have also been doing throughout the meeting. And I will read those questions aloud to our panel, and they'll be answered live here tonight as well. So to start off with, I think a couple of the remarks already have asked questions about the bike lanes. So I'm going to read some more questions about the bike lanes so that we can clarify the cross section. So one came from Catherine Duff, who asked, is the bike lane only on one side? If so, which side, north or south? Oh, and that's the only bike lane question so far in the Q&A. So let's start with that one.
Sure. Thank you, Leah. That's a great question. There's a 4-foot bike lane on both sides of the bridge.
4-foot shoulder, Joe, and then
4-foot shoulder, yeah,
Turkey's path.
right. Tom, we can maybe bring up the cross-section that we showed that will help respond to our questions here. So we have the two 11-foot travel lanes with a 4-foot shoulder with the 10-foot shared use path for pedestrians.
And is the shared use path on the north or the south side of the bridge?
Both sides.
Oh, both sides. Okay, thank you. I think that answers Catherine's question. All right, and then I'm gonna do one more that I've seen kind of asked a few times in the Q&A, and then I'll turn it over to Addie for some raised hands. So we had some questions or some folks wondering about how we got to the vertical lift bridge. So Rebecca asked, can MassDOT share the analysis of the considered bridge type alternatives with the scoring and reasoning? For example, I'm interested to learn how the different impacts on the businesses and roadways in the vicinity were described and evaluated. And then Ian also asked a similar question, what considerations led to the selection of the lift bridge type as opposed to another type of opening bridge, in particular, not bascule bridge? So thank you both for your question.
Sure. So as we outlined previously, we've had two meetings, for the first public information meetings, and then the second public information meeting went over all the rationale of the other types of bridges that we analyzed and went through the outline of why those bridges are not viable. And that presentation and all the presentations are on the website, and there's links. It'll have the date of the presentation and the public information meeting number. And as you scroll down, you can open up the slide deck, and also a recording of the meeting is found as well. So that it goes through that in detail that we reviewed that back in January of this year. Tom, do you have any other comments on that?
Sure. I guess just a very brief summary to address the specific points regarding businesses and impacts. All the various movable bridge alternatives do require that the Route 6 be closed for a period of time to remove the old bridge and build a replacement bridge. The lift bridge alternative gives us the ability to do a lot of pre-construction work before that road closure. So that's why the road closure would be significantly reduced, somewhere between a year and a half, rather than 3 to 5 years for the other alternatives. So that's one of the major driving criteria when it came to impacts was the length of time that the Route 6 would be closed during construction. And so that the other alternatives do require a longer closure, just because the existing bridge has to be removed to even start construction on those other alternatives. Whereas there's a lot of ability with a lift bridge to build around the existing bridge. So I hope that helps some.
Thank you both. I just want to read one comment before we go to the raised hands, and then also maybe we could go to the slide with the website link after this so that people can get to those more detailed presentations if they want. So quickly from Elise, Elise says, I think people want a separation of pedestrians and bikes, and there's confusion about the shared use aspect. So thank you for pointing that out,
I'll let
Elise.
Tom Cole, our consultant, go into
Um,
depth on that, please.
So we did a lot of coordination with MassDOT Complete Streets to arrive at the cross section that we proposed here in the picture. There are limitations outside of our project area that we have to tie back into. So if we were to build a bridge that had wider lanes, different shared use path configuration, tying that back into the roadway at the driveways on either side on Pope's Island and Fish Island, that becomes a challenge. So we've come up with something that provides better than existing access on the bridge, something that can be worked with for future corridor reconstruction. I mean, there are businesses, the Fleet Marina on one corner, there's on Fish Island, there's a warehouse, that those would have to, there'd be significant impacts to those businesses to even contemplate anything wider than what we've got now. So those are the kind of things that we discussed with Complete Streets to arrive at something that maximizes what's available to us to provide for bicycles and pedestrians.
Thank you. I'm going to request that we go back to our contact us slide, just so people can check out those earlier presentations if they want. I'm going to turn the floor over to Addie to take some raised hands.
Thank you, Leah. We have a raised hand. John York, you can now unmute your mic and speak and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question about the travel lanes, shoulder, and path, and how they relate to each other. Specifically, a couple of things. The shoulder's 4 feet, and if you're really picturing bicycles using that regularly so that the paths would be primarily for pedestrians, I think you would want that a little bit wider. On the other hand, if you're viewing the paths as being true shared use paths right from the get-go, then the paths might also be a little bit wider than 10 feet. It also depends upon if you're picturing two-way travel on both paths. I don't know if you have room to add, even if you just added a foot to each shoulder, that would add 2 feet to the total width of the cross section. And even though that seems like a tiny little amount, I know when you're dealing with building structures, sometimes there's break points or whatever. If you're really looking at bicyclists using the shoulder, I think 5 feet would be better than 4. And if you're looking at two-way pedestrian and bicycle use on each side, you should go to 12 feet instead of 10 feet. My next part of that question is, how will the travel lanes and shoulders be plowed? Will the snow be removed, or will it be stored on the shoulder? And along with that question goes, when and how will the path be plowed and cleared? Will the snow be removed or just pushed to the side with a loss of effective path width? So those are the real questions that I have.
If you could review the snow removal and the weight issue that typically, oh, go ahead, Tom. I'll let you
Sure.
review that, please.
I mean, the specifics of maintenance of that walkway is something that's determined during the next steps in design. But because it's a lift bridge, the lift span will be removing the snow so it can operate as best we can in its entirety. So day of, are there gonna be snow banks on either side just to get the roadway somewhat open? Absolutely. But as soon as they can, the plows will have to come back and clear all of the snow from the lift span. And then we can work to get the snow off of the approach spans as well. Because it's all going to be the same equipment going across the same span. So they would just go from extent to extent. Would be the intent there.
Thank you for your answer. We have Brandon Mitchell. You can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So I work for Norpel. Norpel is the major processor warehouse that is located on Fish Island. And just about every day we have about 20 to 30 tractor trailers coming to and leaving Fish Island. So my first question is, will access to Fish Island be impeded at any point during construction? My second question is, part of our business involves offloading fishing vessels, and we offload these fishing vessels on the northeast side of Fish Island. So will the access to the northeast dock or bulkhead of Fish Island be impeded? Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom. You can.
Sure. So as far as access to the islands, Hope's Island will always be accessible from Fairhaven. Fish Island will always be accessible from New Bedford. Crossing between the two islands, there will be a period of time, at least year and a half, where that crossing won't be open during construction. So you'll always have access, but it will be different than the normal operations for you right now when the bridge is under construction. As far as navigation goes, part of the Coast Guard coordination, the contractor building the bridge is required to maintain navigational clearance and availability at all times, with the exception that they can apply for short-term closures with the U.S. Coast Guard that would be publicly advertised and coordinated with you and the rest of the fishing community before anything were to happen. For instance, the lift span itself, that will most likely come in on a barge. They barge it into place, and then they have to connect up all the lifting cables and lift it off the barge. That takes somewhere in the order of a day or two to get that done. So usually there's a maritime closure that's coordinated well in advance for that singular closure. Other than that, maintaining navigation is one of the primary requirements of building a lift bridge during construction. So you will have access to the bulkhead most of the time, and you'll certainly be coordinated with before there is any impact.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to do a couple more of the written questions now. And I've seen another theme in the written questions, which is about, aesthetics of the bridge. So I'm going to read a couple of these that are similar. The first from Rachel: the aesthetic of the existing bridge provides continuity across the landscape. It's prominent without being conspicuous. The lift bridges proposed so far really impact the visual landscape of the port and upper harbor. The steel, as shown stands out like construction equipment or a cell tower. The concrete design was something Gotham-esque. Our port is quite unique, and this bridge should reflect both its natural beauty and its industrial function. Then let me scroll up. Yep, another one from Jennifer. Are there options of lift bridges? The design shown here tonight is pretty uninspiring for such a prestigious seaport. And finally, from Cora, we are being shown metal towers in these slides, whereas prior photographs show cement towers. Which type are proposed? So thank you for all those questions.
So thank you, Leah, and thank you for those great comments. The team is aware of the rich history of the New Bedford Harbor and the fishing community. And as we go into the sketch plan phase, we're going to be working with a architectural firm who specializes in vertical lift bridges, and they'll help to weave in the architectural elements that make New Bedford the rich and nautical history that it has, and to integrate that with the new bridge. And at this time, we don't have, those are just examples of a lift bridge. So as we progress in the to the sketch plans and beyond, we'll start to come up with more refined types of vertical lift bridges that will reflect the history of New Bedford and the port.
Great, thank you, Joe. And actually, a follow-up relevant question that I also see in the Q&A is from Catherine, who asked, who is the bridge architect?
The company that's been hired, it's T.Y. Lin. They're a architectural firm out of San Francisco.
Great, thank you. All right, and let's have one more question from Ian, and then we'll jump back to the raised hands. Try to get a little bit of both here. So from Ian, slide 18 describes a maximum vertical opening of 135 feet, which is in keeping with the clearance of many fixed bridges. However, an intermediate vertical opening of only 80 feet is proposed. This 80-foot opening could unduly constrain vessel traffic if that is the intended maximum standard opening. So what is the intended vertical clearance when opened? Thank you, Ian.
Yes, thank you, Ian, for that question. The 135-foot clearance will allow essentially all vessels that are in the harbor to go into the upper North Harbor. The intermediate clearance was determined based upon a canvassing of all the fishing vessels that go in and out or through the swing bridge currently. And that intermediate 80 feet clearance will allow pretty much all the fishing vessels to enter and exit the bridge. And that will also help the vehicular traffic where the opening and closing time will be much shorter. So that will help the speed up and allow more fishing vessels with the vertical lift bridge will be able to enter and exit the harbor quicker than the swing bridge, and the cycle time will be shorter, which will help vehicular traffic.
And just again, because it's a perfect follow-up question and it's asked in here, what is the road closure to road reopening cycle time for regular marine vessel traffic passage? Also from Ian.
Sure. Tom, do you have that?
Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't remember. It's somewhere in the order. So open to traffic, close to traffic. I believe right now it's about a 4-minute cycle to open the bridge, however long it takes to pass all the vessel traffic, and then about the same 4-minute time to reverse that cycle. So that's what it is currently. the cycle time for a lift bridge, especially at that 80-foot clearance, is less than the current cycle time to get from a closed bridge to allowing vessel traffic to start moving through there. The majority of the time the traffic is held up is for vessels to pass through the bridge rather than for the bridge to close and open. So sorry, I don't have a specific time for you, but that's what I can give you right now.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, since we're on the How to Reach Us page, that if you are looking for a super detailed answer or back and forth that you weren't able to get here tonight, the project email is New Bedford Fairhaven Swing Bridge at dot.state.ma.us. And you can always email in comments as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to Addie for some more raised hands.
Thank you, Leah. So we have a Mary Ellen Boyle. I'm going to allow you to speak, so you can unmute your phone right now and ask your question. So you can unmute your mic and you can ask your question. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a question. I'm not sure why I look like I might.
Oh, you're okay. Sorry, your hand was raised.
I apologize.
No worries. So we will go to Elise Raposa. You may unmute your mic and ask the question.
Yes, thank you. I have a few questions, but I was going to stick it to one because I know we said just have one. I'm actually going to use a different one that I put in the chat. The bridge you gave in the slides as an example from Jacksonville, Florida, was built in 1941. There have been many structural and material engineering advancements since then. I'm wondering if MassDOT could look into more advanced designs for vertical lift bridges from an engineering perspective that have the potential to improve the longevity of the bridge, reduce maintenance costs, and not least of all, create a more modern, aesthetically pleasing design. There are more recently designed and constructed vertical lift bridges that aren't nearly so ugly and depressing looking, while also being lighter while still increasing strength.
Go ahead, Tom, if you could tackle that question.
Yes,
please.
So as Joe had mentioned, the part of our sketch plan process is to work with the bridge architect and develop how this bridge is actually going to look, what materials to use, and what the appearance is going to be. So that we just used views that kind of gave an idea of the overall size and height of the bridge more than the aesthetic appearance for this presentation.
Thank you for your answer. So we have one more raised hand. I'm going to allow you to speak right now, so you can unmute your mic.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Will Gardner from Fairhaven Livable Streets. I am on the bridge right now, and you'll have to excuse me if there's some background noise. That is the traffic behind me. I'm on my way over to New Bedford, but figured I'd take this meeting from the place where we were talking about. When we're talking about creating space for people outside of automobiles and especially things like shared use paths, and I'm glad that you're including a 10-foot protected shared use path. There's a few things we want to keep in mind, and I know you're talking about complete streets, so you're already talking about these things, but safety and cohesion and directness and comfort and attractiveness are all really important. On the safety side, I'm glad to see there's going to be protected space for people walking and biking. As you can hear, or at least protected space for people walking, as you can hear, if there's not protected space for those people on bikes, they're not going to use this, right? I've got traffic going by me 50, 60 miles an hour. You've got a pretty overbuilt corridor right here. It's just not safe. You know, would you put your kids here? Would you put You know, I have a friend whose grandmother rides this route regularly. You know, would you put her next to this traffic without any protection? That's unconscionable, right? You wouldn't do that. So I think what's going to happen is if you put an unprotected bike gutter there, people aren't going to bike it. They're not going to feel comfortable doing that. They're going to bike in the shared use, and that could potentially create conflicts. So I think there was an earlier commenter who mentioned if you're going to have two-way traffic on the shared use, then you're going to want to widen that shared use. Now, other people were saying, oh, you're going to have to widen the roadway. I don't think that's true because you already have a 4-foot shoulder, which is essentially widening the roadway and creating speed. We need to look at the design speed of this roadway. You've got 11-foot lanes. You don't need them that wide necessarily. I know you'll tell me that you do, but you don't. You can slow traffic with narrower lanes. There's no reason why these cars should be going 50, 60 next to me on this corridor. And if you don't want to do that, you can take from that shoulder. Don't put bikes in there unless you're going to protect them or unless you're going to calm traffic enough to, you know, speeds below 25 miles an hour that they'd be safe. So you can take away from the shoulder, take a few feet away from it or take that whole shoulder away and build a real shared use path that both people on bikes and people walking can use. And that's the safety aspect. And I just want to speak real quick to the comfort aspect. You want to make sure that it's smooth for bikes and wheelchairs and strollers, that it has some friction if it rains. Right now, it's really slippery on this bridge. And noise. I can hear this bridge. I live over in Fairhaven, a little over a mile away. Instead of counting sheep at night, I count cars going over the bridge because I can hear them come over the bridge at night because of the design speed of the road and the materials of the road. And the fact that you've got water underneath it, it makes it very loud from far away and it makes it very loud to be on. You want to create a space here, not only that people are safe walking over, biking over, but that it's pleasant, that we would be able to carry on a conversation on the way home from work. That's how you're going to encourage mobility. And I know that MassDOT talks a big game about wanting to encourage, you know, multiple modalities and different types of mobility and active transportation. If you want to encourage it, you've got to provide for that comfort. And that means reducing the noise. That means both reducing vehicle speeds and then looking at the acoustics of the building as well. And then the last piece on just comfort and safety, and then I'll shut up, is lighting. So I'm here, it's pretty dark where pedestrians and bikes are going by. And there's lighting for cars on the road. Again, if you want to make this a real space that's attractive for people outside of cars, provide lighting that's at a human level, that's going to illuminate people who are walking along these side paths. That also increases safety. You know, if I'm walking at night, I'm going to feel a lot less vulnerable when there's lighting. And also you can increase the attractiveness of the bridge. Imagine connecting this to the fabric of the walkable downtown of New Bedford. You've got Union Street. You got a lot of great places to go there, a lot of nightlife. Imagine going from a restaurant over at Union, walking up the walkway, and then being out on this beautiful bridge. The important view when you're talking about this bridge is not of the bridge, it's from the bridge. I know I said last thing. This is actually my last thing is.
You really should. Sorry, we have a 2-minute time limit. So can that be your last thing?
In terms of comfort, yes. Look, I'm out on the bridge. I'm on here every day. In terms of comfort, you've got a lot of seniors who walk over this bridge. If you want to encourage more mobility for folks older and younger and disabled folks, you need to provide refuge for folks as they're walking this span. There needs to be places where people can stop, benches, and that also is going to, you know, reflect the great views of the harbor and make it an attractive place to be. Thanks. Sorry, I went over time.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Gardner, thank you for your comments. We appreciate them. We've written down a lot of notes and we'll try to integrate them as much as we can. As one note, the existing bridge, as you're well aware, is a 120-plus-year-old design bridge. The new bridges will have modern type of designs. The existing bridge is an open grate bridge, which means that there's like a metal grate mesh, which is noisy and slippery. The new bridge will not be open grate. It will have a like a concrete or more of an abrasive surface, which is better for people walking and biking and also for motorists. It won't be as noisy. And it'll also be safer. So thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So Leah, over to you now.
Great. I'll take some more from the Q&A here. There's a question from Miles. How much more cheaply could the bridge be built if it were reduced to one vehicle lane in each direction with a bike path and sidewalk? Thank you, Miles.
Tom, if you could answer that question, please.
So the question is the cost of the bridge, eliminating a traffic lane,
Per direction.
per direction. Would it be less expensive? Yes. But based off of the information we have from our traffic studies, from the traffic studies, the corridor traffic studies that MassDOT has done, dropping to one lane in each direction isn't feasible given the traffic volumes in the area. So would it be less expensive? Yes. To give you even a percentage difference, sorry, I don't think I can give that to you off the top of my head. But in reality, it's not really a viable option to do that.
Excuse me, Leah, if the next question, can you acknowledge Jennifer Carloni? She's from the City of New Bedford, Director of Planning. Can you acknowledge her? Thank you.
Yes, let's do that. Be able, oops, I pressed the wrong button. I'm so sorry. Okay, now you should be able to talk or unmute yourself. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Jennifer Carloni, Director of the Department of City Planning for New Bedford. I just wanted to make a couple comments here. Again, like the project team indicated, we're enthused that MassDOT has moved forward with this replacement of this bridge. It's time for this bridge to be replaced. We all acknowledge that. We believe in MassDOT and that they have done bridges. We see them working with the Cape and Boston and having some beautiful bridges. And we expect the same level of commitment, design, communication with our local communities. And we want to see that, and we expect that from MassDOT. I do want to indicate and acknowledge that it's been said that this is at the 25% design. It's my understanding it's not at the 25% design yet. We are not at that threshold. We are not at that public hearing. And we at the city want to be involved prior to that 25% design being finalized. It is very important to us. It is important that there's a bridge architect. I'm very happy to hear that. That's brand new news to us, that there's a bridge architect on. I'm very happy to hear that. And we want to see that at this point because the architectural features need to be coordinated intricately with the engineering pieces. So we want to see that. There's also, I think some people asked about that bridge type selection. We still want to see the bridge type selection worksheet. That's the report that comes out with how that selection came out. We understand at this point that this is the bridge type that is most likely the best type given the constraints that are on the other types of bridges. It's not our favorite idea, but we understand the pros and cons as presented by MassDOT at this point. We do want that participation with our local community. And again, I just want to note, this is the New Bedford Fairhaven Bridge. That is the name of the bridge. It is located in New Bedford. And while we acknowledge it is an industrial port, which it absolutely is, it has to be practical, it has to be functional. But as many of the comments this evening have indicated, we have a historic downtown as well as Fairhaven, and it's very important in how this bridge integrates into our community and how it appears for our port and for our communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I just would like to add that I know that recently Secretary Tippett Nutt met with Mayor Mitchell of New Bedford, and I know that they talked about how important it is to make sure that the city of New Bedford is involved with every step of the design, and MassDOT has made that commitment. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer, for your comments. And we look forward to, working as the design progresses and as we outlined in the next steps going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the Q&A. There's one more theme that I think we haven't touched on, so I'm going to read two similar questions on that. The first is from Elise, who says there are 2 traffic detours, which locals are more than accustomed to using due to multiple outages and renovations. Thus, the roadway impacts during construction don't seem like an important factor to consider. How are the different design specifications weighed, and how much did cost factor in, which hasn't been mentioned at all? And then the similar question from Daniel, is it safe to say that primary reason for the vertical bridge is time, a 1 to 1.5 year build versus 3 to 5 years? While I understand the importance of time, this is a legacy project that will last a minimum of 75 years and will fundamentally change the skyline of New Bedford. While expediency is important, it shouldn't be done at the cost of installing the right bridge for both cities. Other reasons cited to update the existing bridge are long opening times and better minimal underbridge clearance. Are we talking about seconds difference? And the closed opening is how high? So thank you both for those questions.
Tom, do you want to go into a little bit of the history of on the prior meetings of how the vertical lift was selected back earlier in the year? And it's not just due to cost, it's due to the operational types of the other bridges and how they would be. I'll let you expound a little bit briefly on that.
Sure. I mean, there are, if you go back into the previous presentations, there are several different options for movable bridges, starting just with the existing type, the swing type that leaves a big pier in the middle of the corridor or the navigation channel. It's really a type that isn't used anymore because it puts a large object right in the middle of where people are trying to navigate. And it's always going to be a limitation. So that's really the primary reason why that the swing bridge was eliminated, just as a concept. The bascule bridges, which don't have an overhead counterweight, require all that counterweight to be under the bridge, which, given that we're only 6 feet above sea level now, even before any taking climate change into account, would put all the operational equipment underwater, which then, as you probably have found just in your lives in general, water gets in no matter what you do. So there's a limitation there on top of just the duration to construct a bridge, but operationally fighting the water every time there's a high tide creates an ongoing maintenance problem for the entire life of the bridge, which is something that I don't think anybody wants to have the bridge get stuck up or down on a regular basis due to water infiltration. There are other options that involve, they don't have lift towers, but they have a counterweight, so a large concrete block above the roadway, just directly above the roadway. For a bridge this size, it's still tens of feet tall above the roadway. That type of bridge also is a type of bridge that there are several instances in Massachusetts currently. They have maintenance problems themselves. Again, they get stuck. They're very easily shifted. you have to get a crane out there to try and fix it. So operationally, the risk to having the opening for either vehicular traffic or navigation closed because of a bridge closure or bridge in operation is much higher with those alternatives. That's some of the factors that we also looked at to make our determination. Is just reliability of maintaining the operation of the bridge for its entire lifetime.
Thank you. That was very thorough. All right. Just want to get a couple more of the folks from the Q&A who've been waiting a little while to get their questions answered, and then we'll go back to the raised hands. So Rebecca asked, what is meant and intended by future corridor improvements, which was one of the goals identified for the bridge alternatives defined?
So basically, if we go back to the slide, Tom, of our project limits, kind of the blow up of Fish and Pope's Island. Please.
Yep. Actually,
That's perfect right there.
Yeah.
So the project limits are from the interior edge of Fish Island to Pope's Island. That's the focus of this project and the full scope of the project. We don't have anything to do beyond that. So once our project is done, in the future, if some other project did want to expand bike or pedestrian and shared use pathways, they could, but that's not the scope of this project. So it's something in the future that may or may never happen.
Yeah, Joe, I'll add, since I've
Sure.
been in contact with the Complete Streets engineer for MassDOT too for different things, is that he often says we don't want to preclude any future work. So if there was ever a plan for the whole corridor, we wouldn't want the bridge to be a choke point and have us already have worked on the bridge and not be ready to go back to it for some time. So I hope that helps. And then one more question before we go back to the raised hands from Jeff. Jeff says there's a state law dictating 4-foot space between cyclists and passing traffic. How does a 4-foot bike lane satisfy this requirement? And then Jeff also asked about, kind of the experience of riding a bike next to fast moving traffic, if any of us have experience with it. So thank you, Jeff.
Tom, do you want to answer that question, please?
The cross section that we've developed in conjunction with Complete Streets at MassDOT meets all of the applicable design code that is available in Massachusetts, as well as federal statute. So I guess I don't know specifically how to answer regarding the 4-foot offset there. But that is what we're using are the design codes and standards that MassDOT has put forward to use. I agree on riding a bicycle in a shoulder on a higher speed roadway is uncomfortable. And this project is only, as Joe mentioned, is only addressing a small portion of this corridor. We're trying our best to not preclude, as Leah said, any future improvements that would improve the corridor as a whole. And that's really where we are. And what we're trying to do here is make things better than they are now, and also leave open the window for even more improvement in the future when the corridor as a whole is worked on.
Thank you. Let's go now to some of the raised hands.
All right. So we have Ned Charpentier. You may now unmute your mic and ask your question. Go ahead. Ned, you may ask your question. Okay. All right. We'll go to the next person. Bob Espindola, you may now unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, I had put my question into the chat, but it was essentially in the cross section, the separation showed, the shared use path, the separation, and then the 4-foot lane there. Would it be possible to just shift the separation on the other side of the 4 feet, so you'd have 14 feet in total combined for pedestrians and cyclists? Because in practicality, people in today's current bridge layout, they ride their bicycles in the same path as people who are walking, and it would effectively do the same thing with more space. Is that possible?
We can look into that and get back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. We'll take the next question from Vincent Manfredi. You may now ask a question.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. And I just have a quick question about the flanking spans. There's really not much that was spoken about tonight about them, and I understand that they're supposed to be replaced as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, my question then would be, is the plan to leave the greater height below the bridge structure at the ice house the same as it is today, or is it going to be lower than it currently is? The clearance that a vessel would have to pass underneath that section.
I can get that one, Joe. But the flanking spans we're addressing are just the spans between Fish Island and Pope's Island. So that secondary channel between Fish Island and New Bedford, where the ice house is, that those spans are not part of this project. So that's going to remain the height that it is after this project is completed.
Thank you, Tom. So we have, let's see, Gordon Carr. You may now unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you for this, for all of you and for all of the work. I will say I got a little bit of a kick out of the letter that I submitted to the Coast Guard being referred to as a supporting letter. It was a relenting letter after the briefing. And Tom, when you just walked through all the alternatives analysis, which you did in great detail for us, thankfully, in August, because Gordon Carr, Port Director, Port of New Bedford, all things being equal in a maritime environment, you don't want to have any height restrictions at all. And in this case, for a variety of reasons, functional and otherwise, regrettably, this is the best available option. And what my letter said was that it was exceeding to a minimum clearance of 138 feet. And I will reach all the way back to Chairman Strauss's remarks earlier about the prospect of perhaps looking at higher levels for minimums, or the possibility of designing for a future extension of the height of the bridge. There is There are lots of reasons for that, right? You just described how you are designing the actual span for future corridor improvements that may or may never occur. So simply designing the height restriction for whatever vessels are currently using it strikes me as inconsistent. And also matching it against bridges and heights that were set probably 50 or 60 or more years ago with the other bridges that are done for comparison purposes. I just hope that during the design process, there's some consideration for and more research on what a future height could be beyond 138 feet. That's the minimum that the Coast Guard set. But there could be all kinds of operational benefits. Again, to Mr. Turpin's point and his comment, this is a 75-year decision. We don't know what may come, and these are the times where we need to think about that and prepare for potential future maritime uses. So this is the best option. We do appreciate Massport's or MassDOT's efforts in doing that analysis and providing us that summary. But as we go towards 25% design, I hope there is some attention paid to what is the optimal achievable clearance that could be designed for. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, would any of the project team like to respond to that? If not, I can take some more Q&A.
Well, I guess just Gordon, definitely as part of going into the more specifics once we get into sketch plans, certainly designing for a future raising of the bridge, just increasing the height of the towers is certainly possible. We'll talk with MassDOT about that, to at least include a provision to make those towers taller in the future. But I know that there's concern about the height of the towers from an appearance standpoint already. Like we talked about, there are pros and cons to everything. But yeah, we can certainly try and accommodate future expansion as best we can.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just gonna wrap up. There's 4 open questions in the Q&A, so we'll just go through them real quick. Oh, I just got another one. From Rebecca, what is meant by architectural treatment and what is meant by laying the groundwork for it, described as aspects of the sketch plan? Thank you, Rebecca.
Tom, you can.
Do you want me to?
Sure, a little bit of the overall framework of that. Yes.
So structurally, the bridge is going to have to be a certain width, a certain height to be able to meet all the structural requirements, and that depends a little bit on what materials we use. So working with the architect, we'll give them sizes. So that would be kind of the framework, the sizes of what things have to be. Working with the architect, just from the general size to what it actually looks like. That would be the architectural treatment aspect of that. So you have the frame of the bridge structurally to make everything work, and then outside of that, working with that to get something that works architecturally as well. So that's what was meant by architectural treatments and framework. But that process is ongoing beyond the sketch plan process. We're just at sketch plans laying the groundwork and the basic concepts of what this bridge is going to look like, to be further developed after another round of review, beyond the sketch plan level.
Thank you for that clarification. Before I read another question from the Q&A, I am noticing that some folks are dropping off. That's totally valid. We've been on for a while now, so I do want to make sure that I point out again that you can also submit email comments or written comments if you do have to leave and you still have questions, or if you think of something later. So with that, the next question is, what was the selection process used to select the bridge architect, and was any New England firm considered?
The qualifications, there aren't a lot of firms that do bridge architecture. So we went with a number of firms who we've worked with in the past. The architect, not only the firm, but the architect who's going to be managing this project, has worked in Massachusetts. Sea Island's main office is out in San Francisco. So the architect who will be working with us is familiar with Massachusetts, and working with MassDOT. So that's, I guess, the short version of the process.
Great, thank you. The next question is from Anthi. How will the bridge construction timing overlap with the Route 195/18 improvements also planned?
Right, so I can handle that. The 195 project is scheduled to start, I believe, next year in the spring to summer timeframe. And it's scheduled to be completed in the spring of 2029. And at that point, we hope to start our project 2028. But a lot of the preliminary work, if we do even start in 2028, is outside the existing footprint, and it's preparatory work, and it would not interfere with that project. So that project will not interfere with our project.
Great, thank you. And then we got two questions about the lift cycle time. So from John, from your answer on lift cycle time, it sounds like the cycle time will be 8 minutes plus vessel transit time. That seems like 12 to 15 minutes of road closure. 15 minutes could create quite a traffic jam. Will the bridge be lifted on a daily schedule or on demand? How will bridge lifts be optimized to serve marine and road users? And then Elise had the question, actually, I think this is slightly different, so I'm going to ask it separately. Let's just stick with the question from John on cycle time for now.
Okay, the 4 minutes, I believe, is the cycle time of the current swing bridge. Depending on the specifics as we get into design, the cycle time of the lift bridge will be shorter than that. I mean, it's not instantaneous. So it will be less. The vessels, by federal statute, vessels have the right of way. So there's no limitation on how many vessels. If there's a line of vessels that takes half an hour to pass through the bridge, it's open for half an hour. So that's outside of our control. Things we can control are the 80-foot proposed interim height, which lessens the opening and closing time. The schedule for the bridge is determined by Coast Guard. That's not going to change significantly, if at all. Right now, it opens once an hour planned, except for possibly in the middle of the night it's opened on demand only. I'd have to go back and look. But it does open on a schedule now, and that schedule is gonna remain the same, give or take.
Thank you. And there are some more questions trickling in the Q&A. So let's just go to the one raised hand we have left, and then we'll go back and wrap up the Q&A.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Leah. We have Vincent Manfredi. You can now unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi,
Thank you.
thank you. So I have a quick question about traffic detours. I live in Fairhaven, and I live in a neighborhood that's pretty highly affected by the Route 6 bridge closures when they're necessary for repair. I've lived through it before, and I'm wondering when would be the appropriate time to voice concerns about potentially closing off streets, or is there a mechanism to close off residential roads that get used by impatient people in an inappropriate fashion during these closures? Since this closure looks like it's going to be lasting maybe upwards of 2 years or maybe longer, I was just wondering if you'd have any guidance on that.
Sure. Certainly you live there, you know better than we'll ever know exactly what goes on during these closures. It is something that we are already studying. We've taken a number of counts along many intersections along the planned detour routes. If you have input and you know of shortcuts that people take that need to be looked at and possibly addressed, please, if you can provide that information to MassDOT, we will certainly look at it, see if there are ways to mitigate that. Your input at any time is appreciated. The best way is to use the information that's up on the screen there, to get in touch with us. That way it's documented at MassDOT, and we can work from there.
Thomas, I would like to just add to that. Part of the solution will be careful and clear coordination with the local police from the town of Fairhaven and the city of New Bedford, as well as state troopers, because the only way you can stop people from, using the smaller local streets is to have some enforcement in place along with messaging. So I just wanted to add that. But as we mature with the design, that will be a good place for the local residents who know their streets better than anyone to make sure they inform MassDOT on their concerns, and we'll do our best to incorporate it with our solutions. So thank you for that. Very good question. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have our last two questions in the Q&A. First is from Elise. One of the problems with the current bridge is that it is so low it must be opened and closed very frequently for even the smallest boats. A 6-foot height doesn't seem to be enough to mitigate that problem, which I thought was one of the goals of the project. Also, is that high enough for potential sea level rise? Thank you, Elise.
So that's a great question. We are looking at trying to raise the bridge design for the new vertical lift bridge as high as we possibly can. We are tied in by Fish and Pope's Island, where the roadway has to access the businesses on both islands. And as a result of that, we can only raise the roadway a certain amount. And we're trying to optimize that as much as we can to also allow vehicles to access the adjacent businesses in the park.
Thank you. Next question is from Ned. who said Representative Strauss tonight said significant resources were dedicated to the project. How important is this dollar amount compared to other state projects in our Commonwealth? How does this compare to budgets for projects in other locations, including Boston and Cape Cod, that have more modern looking bridges, compared to what is being offered here to New Bedford and Fairhaven? Thank you, Ned.
So the vertical lift bridge, it's going to be an expensive bridge. It's difficult to compare the Cape Cod bridges to the vertical lift bridge replacement that we're going to be utilizing. Different designs, one's fixed. The Cape Cod bridges, which will be fixed. This is a movable span bridge. The size is much smaller for this bridge right here. And so funding is just the order of magnitude larger, obviously, for the Cape due to the very large scope and scale of those two bridges.
All right, thank you. And the last question, and then we're going to wrap up, is from Sandra, who asks, the presentation stated that alternative transportation accommodations will be studied for people walking or biking. I believe this is during construction. Would you consider a water taxi?
It's certainly not off the table. It's something that we'll have to talk about with MassDOT, based off of what's available, working with local operators, and places to access on both sides. But yeah, that is one of the many alternatives that has been put on the table to talk about as depending on availability.
Right. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions, and to our project team. Let's go back to the end of our slide deck, and I'll turn the presentation back to Joe to close us out tonight.
Thank you, Leah. I want to thank you all for attending this meeting and asking a lot of great questions. It's a complicated project. Myself and the MassDOT team, as well as my design engineer, Tom Cole, we're very engaged. We spend a lot of time on this project. We give it a lot of thought. We care about it a lot, and we want to try to have the best bridge possible for the community. And we thank you for attending the Fairhaven and New Bedford Swing Bridge Replacement Project for tonight, December 19th, 2024 at 6 p.m. Thank you and have a good evening.